Welcome into another interview edition of the FutureSox podcast. My name is Elijah Evans, and I've got another 2024 White Sox draft pick on with me today. We're welcoming in Blake Shepardson. Super excited to talk to him just about his pitching, his development, this draft process, and everything in between. Super pumped to have you on today, Blake. How you doing, man?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. So we'll start here. This is the first thing we're asking everyone. What was the draft like for you? It's a crazy experience. Like we've everybody, I've talked over the past few years, right? Like it's unique. Everyone has their own draft story. What was draft day like for you, and generally just the process leading up to the draft?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously, it was kind of a roller coaster just because, there's a lot of things going on and like there's a plethora of moving pieces. But it was pretty special for me just because I had a younger brother who went in the fifth round of the Marlins on day two. So, honestly, that was just, honestly, it was just, obviously it was I'm speechless. Like it was just so cool to watch, just because him and I are super close and, we're best friends. Right. So, watching a dream of his like unfold right in front of me it was just absolutely electric. Right. So, that was just super cool, but, I guess more so like my story, like day two, there were some teams that, showed some interest, but, obviously nothing came of it. Like I was having the feeling that I was going to go more like, early day three or, whenever, but so I wasn't really too surprised. Like, it's always cool to like, see some like traction go up with some teams, but, yeah, so I just like sat on the couch, like watched the draft happen, and like I was watching the draft tracker on my phone, and like I saw the first three picks were already in there, and then the White Sox popped up, and my name was up there, and before the draft, like on the TV was like going up there, so I was only sitting on the couch like watching for like 5 minutes, so that was really cool. I was dreading the waiting process of having to wait and like see all the names go, but it went really smoothly, so. I can't really ask for much more than that.
Yeah, beginning of day three helps a little bit with that waiting process for sure.
For
You don't have
sure,
to really. That's a
definitely,
long day, definitely.
especially just because they're just rattling off names. So to be
Yeah.
off the board was really cool.
Yeah, no, that was pretty cool. So does your brother have some degree of bragging rights, or how did that go about with him getting drafted? Obviously he's a high school guy, so that happens, right?
Yeah.
But like, how did that go between your family?
Honestly, like like you'd think that it'd be pretty competitive, but obviously there's some competitive nature there, but
Yeah.
For the most part, like there was really no like competition. Like I was pretty confident that we were both going to go, and like obviously everyone knew he was going to go just because of his nature and his talent and like the season that he put up, but so like there was really never a competition. Like it was all just like I was super happy for him, he was happy for me, and my parents were just ecstatic.
Yeah.
Right, like it really hasn't sunk in yet for me looking into my parents' shoes, just because they have two kids that are now professional athletes like overnight, right? So
Yeah.
I can't really imagine what they're going through.
Yeah, it's got to be a pretty incredible feeling going
Pretty
from,
cool, yeah.
from both you guys obviously within 2 days of each other, right? So that's pretty special moment there. So as a guy who started at a small university at Regis, and then you made your way to San Francisco for your third year of school, how was kind of your college experience in your first 2 years and then transitioning to San Francisco, and how did that kind of lead to where you are at today?
Yeah, so I guess the whole college thing kind of just roots from my high school experience. I had a pretty brutal high school experience just because I had an elbow surgery at 16. And I was misdiagnosed by a doctor, and that just elongated my recovery process. So I was away from the game like for, I want to say like 16, 17 months. So was not pitching or anything from like my sophomore year to like the end of my junior year. And of course, like my junior year was COVID in 2020. So I want to say I only have like 25, maybe 30. 30 would even be pushing it, like innings in high school. So I did not have really any traction or leverage in any sense going into college, with like any, high end Division I's or whatever it might be. So, obviously being from Denver, Regis University reached out, and at that point, like I was banking on the fact that I wasn't going to be able to play just because my arm was just killing me all the time. Fresh off of surgery, like I wasn't throwing very hard, wasn't performing very well. So I was just thankful for the opportunity, and I took it. So, and then fast forward into Regis, like my freshman year, like I would, I would like to say that I had like some case of the yips or something, just because like it was like my first dose of like an actual like healthy season, and I had kind of had like a velocity jump into like the low to the nines, and like I had no idea how to control it. Like I was finally having some feel for some off speed pitches, learning a changeup, learning a curveball, slider, like literally everything, right? Like I'm finally learning how to pitch, but at a much later timeline than a lot of my friends, which was kind of depressing at the time, just because I'd been out of the game for so long and like I was so far behind. But then sophomore year came around, like I had an okay stint in the Coastal Plains, like my freshman summer, like posted like a 5 ERA, but I was like finally like learning how to like pitch and like learning how to throw, right? So then my sophomore year was okay, like, didn't put up the greatest numbers. Like, my stat line was definitely not where I wanted it to be, but I learned a lot. That was kind of the moment where I figured out that I wanted to like keep playing and like, possibly pursue like a college career and, even a professional career. So, after that, like my brother had committed to University of San Francisco, like I think October of his junior year. So that was obviously cool. Like that was his gig. Like he did that all on his own. And then like after my sophomore year, like I was like, all right, like if I want to have any chance of playing professional baseball, like to any degree, like, it's no secret that like Division I is where you're going to want to be, just with a scouting perspective, development, all that kind of stuff. So, like it was just a very easy decision once I entered the portal that, USF was probably the place to be, just because my brother had already built a really good connection with the coaches, and, it was a good spot. Like, so yeah, I committed there, did this last year there. Then again, like walk numbers are still pretty high. Like my numbers are all just really high, and I'm still kind of learning that, like, I'm still learning how to pitch, right? Like I'm still kind of in that deficit of my development where I was missing out like all throughout high school, and even those first 2 years, like, maybe not getting development I wanted or needed. Right. So it's just kind of been a battle of like trying to catch up. But I think I'm at a point now where I'm kind of breaking that point and, starting to thrive. So, obviously there's much more to it, but that's just kind of the basis of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what's interesting is everybody has this different point of starting and different journey
Right.
along the way, right? Like, I think that's something when you talk to every draft pick I've talked to and over the last 2 years, right? It's like everybody has a different journey. And it seems like
Right.
regardless of you being, delayed partially, whatever you want to call it, it's not even delayed. Everybody goes at their own pace, but you have kind of just, you kept working, right? And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
And now you're in a spot where you're playing professional ball. You're going to have that time to grow as a pitcher. And it's a testament to your work and also your talent, right? Because like you have all these delays in your last 5 years, but clearly the talent that you have is off the charts. So it's exciting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's cool. I appreciate you sharing kind of just all that intel of your journey in that regard. So building on that, like you played in the draft league this summer, which is something that's really interesting because I think we've seen a lot of these White Sox picks now, whether it's the Cape Cod League or the draft league. There's been a lot of guys targeted in the past few years that have been, targeted from those summer ball leagues. So what was your summer ball and the draft league experience like for you, kind of building on, what you said was obviously somewhat of a rocky college career, right?
Yeah. So, I guess like, so my advisor and I, we'd always kind of joke that like I was going to be a much better professional than I was college player. So I think like that basis, or like that kind of understanding of like college baseball doesn't necessarily make you or like decide your future, right? Like obviously it's a huge part, like, it's a stepping stone for everyone, but, just because you don't have like the greatest 3 years of college doesn't mean you're going to be, just some mediocre professional player if you ever get to that point. But, going into the draft league was like we'd kind of decided like, all right, it's time to like show, some scouts and like, some front office guys, like what I'm actually about, and like, finally get into a role that I can feel comfortable in. so we're kind of deciding like if we can try to get myself into like a back end pen or like closer role or setup guy, like whatever it might be, like late in the game, that and I can go for an inning and just kind of just let it rip. Like
Yeah.
I think that's gonna do more good than it does harm, right? So I only ended up having, I think it was like what, 5.1 innings and like over like across 5 games. Like, so I was really, I was only there for like 2.5 weeks, and I only pitched 5 innings, right? So it was really quick, but I think I definitely helped myself more than I could have imagined, just because they're obviously, like, those are very competitive games. Like, those are great college kids from everywhere. And the fact that I performed as well as I did, just kind of put me over the edge. And if there was any solidarity, like for me getting picked up by a team, like I think you just increased that. Like, I don't think I hurt myself in any way. Like, I only helped myself in that, and which is super cool. So
Yeah. Definitely. And your numbers were, metrically, right? That gives an experience. Another added time for people to see your stuff at its finest, and at the time where you don't have a lot of pressure on those innings, right? But it's can really shine. Like I was looking at some of your whip numbers and chase numbers with, your 3 pitches there in the data from the draft league. And it was like obviously a small sample, but numbers that jump out on the page and give, a little more backing for a team that's interested in drafting you.
for sure.
So then one more thing I wanted to ask about the draft, and we'll get a little more into your pitching specifically, but did you have a lot of contact with the White Sox specifically? And if not, kind of how many other teams did you have a lot of contact with during your spring this year and into the summer?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the compliment.
Yeah,
but so like I really had only talked to Adam Burgess, my area scout in San Francisco, like 2 or 3 times, like maybe a phone call here and there. I remember one time I was going to dinner with my friend, and he called out of the blue, like, and he was like, "Hey, like, are you throwing on like a sinker or a 2-seam or like a 4-seam? Like, what is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's like a 4-seam, and sometimes it'll, do this. And like, I'm trying to work on a sinker, blah, blah, blah." Like, so that was like that was the very first conversation. And then I just just text conversations from here and there. Like, but I had literally talked to him like 2 or 3 times. And then come draft day, it was like, yeah, like White Sox are in. I was like, well, that's crazy. Like, I talked to them like less than, like only a few times. But so yeah, it was just crazy. Like, I don't really understand. Like, that's kind of how the draft works, and it kind of get tricky like that just because there was such a lack of communication. But so yeah, just kind of weird, but pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We've heard from a handful of guys in this draft class actually who didn't have a ton of contact other than, here and there with the area scout. And then sometimes it just falls in place where a team's following you. And there's this, there's an interesting pattern right now with the White Sox and their the new development staff on the pitching side of things in the last year or two with Brian Bannister and these other guys. Like, there's definitely this targeted mold of pitchers that have become kind of, heralded by the organization, guys that have kind of a lot of that movement on the fastball, which you profile with, like your sinker especially has a lot of that movement on it, in addition to kind of that low arm slot, a little bit of unique kind of frame of pitching with a lot of movement. So getting into the pitching side of things, like you've worked mostly, at least in the draft league in this summer, mostly, fastball, sinker, kind of 2 fastball variations with the slider. Can you just tell me a little bit about your arsenal and kind of how comfortable you feel with each of those pitches? And then if there's anything else you're working on adding to that mix.
Yeah. So I guess I guess the bread and butter has been 4-seam fastball, and the slider or the sweeper, is the new hype nowadays, right? So, but so my fastball really wasn't like, I've always kind of thrown like what we call like a metrically dead zone fastball, right? So, I started tucking my thumb like under the ball, and that helped a little bit. But I'm training at a facility here in Arizona, I kind of picked up a little thing this winter where I would move my middle finger a little bit more biased toward the middle of the ball, which is super simple, right? But it's like it made like a world of a difference. So that helped me get a little more jump on the fastball. But I was also learning like a seam shifted sinker. So I'd go like a 2-seam orientation and then kind of just mess with the tilt and the axis and all that kind of fun stuff. But that's obviously like what I'm working on now is heavily like sinker, just because if I can throw the sinker as hard as I can throw the 4-seam, like with, a pretty decent movement profile, like I think I'll be, somewhat successful. And then the slider or the sweeper like has like the more I've thrown it, like obviously the better it's gotten, but it's gotten to the point where it's like it's a very very good pitch, and it's still kind of um, like I gotta be able to like harness it. And sometimes like when I was first throwing it, like I would get a little bit too much on the side of it, and like it would spin off, and like I would leave it high on arm side all the time. So like the whole feel versus real thing, like I'm trying to throw a curveball basically, but like it's not a curveball, right? So like when I was throwing it earlier, like it would move so much to where it was like it was very hard to get over like 2-1, 2-0 for a strike. So um like I had like a little gyro cutter or slider or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
but that was kind of like my get me over like 2-0, 2-1 that I use, and like that was before I could really like harness the big slider. Um and then I have like a change up, but like ever since like when I was starting at the very beginning of this last year, like I threw it some to lefties and like very rarely to righties, but like ever since I started coming out of the pen, like I pretty much just scrapped it just because I have those three
Yeah.
like much better pitches. Um, but like I have in the back pocket, so hopefully one day we can break it out or mess with another grip or see what happens. But for now, I mean, it's mainly those three pitches.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're pretty comfortable with those three. Obviously, the sweeper slider, whatever you want to call it, it has some really big movement on it. Is there anything that since you joined the organization with the White Sox, anything they, you said obviously you're focused on those three, but is there anything they are trying to either develop with you or adjust with any of those three?
Um, I mean, then again, it is pretty early, but
Yeah, of course.
just some of like what I've kind of hinted at is,
Yeah.
or what they've hinted at is like I think they're gonna try and turn me into like a predominantly like sinker slider. Um, Obviously like velocity is such a big thing nowadays, so we're gonna try and get like the big velocity with the sinker, and then try and hold shape with the slider, but throw it harder, which obviously is much easier said than done. But
Yeah.
I think I can do it. But um, so yeah, I mean that's basically like been the only thing is like improve fastball shape and then keep slider shape. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much what
Yeah.
I've kind of taken from these last few days.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I know I talked to some other guys. It seems like there's a lot of different pitches that are getting added. The Sox organization has been super big in the last year on the cutter, either cutter or sinker, like one of
Yes,
those
yeah,
different variations of moving the fastballs because it's you can have a four seam, but it doesn't go. It only goes as far as you can take it. If it's not moving, if it's just sitting
exactly,
there in the
yeah,
zone, right? Like you were just saying. So that sinker obviously seems like it'll be an asset for you, and you topped at 98 with it. So if you can get it up, if you can keep it up there, that's with the
right,
sinker, it's going to
yeah.
be very effective. What are some other things that you kind of just see in your profile in your game? What are some things you see with yourself on the mound, whether it be just from a mentality standpoint or just a way you attack at bats that you really, are some of the keys for you as you just work on the mound?
Um, I honestly there's a few big changes that I took from this summer, from like this season at San Francisco, just because I think the biggest thing that has like been holding me back, especially this spring, was my mental game. Um, and I started working with a mental skills coach, who obviously helped me a ton during the season, but like I was still kind of in that burden of like with the draft coming up, and I was like, oh, like having that fear of like, well, I need to be doing this and this, but so like that was obviously a big piece that I struggled with, was the mental piece. Like physically, like I'm very comfortable with my stuff and like how I am as a pitcher, like even after like the delays that I suffered in high school or whatever, like we talked about earlier, whatever you want to call it. But like kind of transitioning into the summer was kind of like it was very refreshing, just because obviously there's you don't know anyone, no one knows you. Like these hitters have never even heard of you, seen you, like gotten in the box against you, right? So kind of like not worrying about who was in the box or who was watching you throw that day. If there was, a scouting director or a cross checker in there, like you have no idea, right? So just kind of that ignorance was kind of what helped me. Um, and just kind of going out there having fun and, just kind of saying screw it and, just letting it eat for an inning was very beneficial for me. So, hopefully we can keep that going.
Yeah, I like that. That's the right way to think about it. Just staying locked in at that point, and the positive
Exactly.
mindset in that regard, right, makes a difference. So
Yeah.
you're the rest of the draft class. A lot of some of these guys know each other from the Cape League, which is funny, and there's even a few guys, some Alabama guys that play together in school. There's a variety of intertwined connections. Did you know
Mhm.
anybody in this class heading in before? And if not, how has it been just getting to know everyone in the last only a week or so?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Pinto was the only other West Coast guy, I believe,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. He was at Irvine.
Paddock too,
Um,
but barely West, sort of
Paddock,
West Coast.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, obviously he's in our conference, but
right.
like obviously I don't really remember him like anything
Yeah.
like that. But it was funny because so Grant McGill, who was a free agent sign, him and I like grew up like literally like 30
Oh
seconds from
wow.
each other. So we're like extremely good family friends. Um, but other than that, like I had known like some guys from just like mutual friends or like stories you hear, right? So, um, but other than that, like I didn't really know anyone, which is pretty cool, just because like you're getting like a completely fresh template,
Yeah.
um, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know anyone, or I mean, surely I would think that like no one had like known who I was, just because like I wasn't coming off of like a monster year or anything. So that's kind of cool too, that they're like, whoa, like that's pretty cool that you're here. So it's all really cool.
No, that makes perfect sense. That's
Yeah,
a cool experience, just to get to know new guys and just to create those
for
bonds
sure.
from a fresh standpoint. Off the field, this is always something I like to give people the opportunity just to highlight themselves a little bit. Outside of baseball, obviously, like you've been through a long baseball journey, and I'm sure it's taken a lot of your time and effort. But off the field, anything you really enjoy doing, or just things you like to keep yourself balanced?
Um, gosh, obviously baseball has taken up so much of my time.
Yeah, of course.
Golf, yeah, golf. I've gotten into golf this year. That's been like my biggest money dump and hobby. In high school, I was big on fly fishing with Grant, like I mentioned before.
Nice. That's cool.
Like we'd go almost every weekend. Just like especially being from Denver, like the outdoors is where I really thrive. So anything hiking, fishing,
Nice.
biking, going for walks, like whatever it might be outside, like skiing, like probably not going to be able to ski anytime soon, but I'd ski a ton in high school. Even when I was at Regis, like I'd go up on some of the off days and just hang out in the mountains. But yeah, just anything I can do to, just stay active and just kind of keep my shoulders level. So
Yeah, 100%. I think we're 5 for 5 now on draft pick interviews being into golfing, so that's a pretty consistent trend on the baseball side of
I know.
things.
I think it needs to be studied. It's like a big phenomenon. Like
It is pretty crazy.
it's crazy. Anyone I've talked to is just loves golf. So
Pretty much. Sounds about right. So what is the rest of the year? Obviously, you didn't have a ton of innings this spring, like you mentioned, and then you had 5 or so innings in the draft league, but it's not like you've had a ton of innings this past year compared to some of the other college guys that were pitching, 100 SEC innings like Hagan and some of the other guys,
yeah.
right? So what is, we're at the end of July right now. You've been in camp right now for the draft. The guys are all doing the draft camp out in Arizona. What is the rest of the next 2 months of this summer looking like for you?
Obviously he's just getting bigger, faster, stronger. Like I think that's just the biggest emphasis is staying healthy, just because, with the season ending, like there's going to be roster changes. There's going to be guys moving up, getting hurt. It's just kind of the business part of it, right? Like it sucks that people are going to be moving in and out, but it's also, I see that as an opportunity. So, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, like, they have me throw in my first bullpen on the 5th, and then should be game ready by August 19th. So, just basically hanging out here and, taking day by day. But, like things can change. So just got to be ready for whatever. Physically, I'm not worried. It's just more so just kind of keeping that mental edge. So just basically, yeah, just taking it day by day and, seeing where every day takes us, but just staying ready at the same time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Keeping building up that throwing progression and everything is obviously
Right.
a process when you join the organization to get into their system and get in the routines they want you in and make sure you're, continuing to improve, but also just getting yourself or, settled almost, right?
Right.
What are some of we'll wrap on this, any big goals as you kind of work through the rest of this season and then heading into next year, really just you have a whole off season ahead of you, your first kind of pro off season of training and everything. Any specific goals or just general goals for yourself before you head into, the 2025 season?
I guess just the biggest thing is just kind of making that a physical adjustment and mental adjustment, like to the professional schedule, right? Because it's a hell of a lot more games and it's a lot harder than what we're used to. So, I'm taking, hydration, sleep, nutrition, all like, I mean, I took it very serious before, but, just kind of taking that extra step. So that's pretty much my biggest goal. But obviously, like once I do get to, an affiliate, is just, helping the team win and getting the guys around me better. But, just, I don't really have like, at least for right now, like any super specific, like, metrical goals or physical goals or anything like that, but just stay healthy, have fun, and just help the team win. So
Yeah, sounds like the right way to think about it. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time. We're looking forward to kind of watching you develop in the organization. I'm excited to get out there, get to see you in person at some point in the future. So thanks for taking the time, man. We appreciate you.
yeah, for sure. Thank you.